Hey everybody, it's Meredith Miller with Inner Integration, and today is your Monday Sana Q&As. I'm here answering questions. If you would like to ask a question for one of these Sana Q&As, please see the link below in the description of the video. That will take you to a page on my website. You will need to be logged into my website in order to post a question there. And then every week I go through and collect as many questions as I can do in a week. I just don't get to all of them. I have like a running list of them right now, and it just keeps adding to it. So it could be weeks before I get to your question. If you have a really pressing question or you would like more in-depth answers, more personal answers than you want to reveal, out there in public, even though I read all of these anonymously, right? But if you want that option, go to my website, innerintegration.com, and look for the personal email support. That's where I answer your email personally within 48 hours, okay? And then if you are interested in more in-depth work, you want to really get to the bottom of something, get out of wherever it is that you're stuck, get a plan to move forward, you want to book a 90-minute strategy session with me on Skype. You could be anywhere in the world. I will send you the MP3 audio recording afterwards so you can listen to it again and again. A lot of emotional stuff comes up, right? And so sometimes it's hard to remember everything, or things that I say and you're trying to remember, but you're trying to be present and you're trying to take notes. That way you can just be totally present. Then you can listen to the recording later, take all the notes that you want and listen to it as much as possible. So this question that I've got right now says, after my codependent relationship with a narc, I had doubts whether I was a narc or not, but I know better now. I'm wondering if the narc relationship made me codependent or that I was codependent all along. Because before this relationship with the narc, I thought I was just a caring person, a Libra, but a little insecure and with a lack of boundaries. I have the best parents in the world, nothing wrong with my youth, etc. If I look at the signs of a codependent person, that was 100% me in this toxic relationship. Am I codependent, and is this a bad thing? It makes me feel again that a lot of things were my fault. Okay, first of all, sweetheart, that was not your fault, what happened. Okay, you were deceived. You were conned. You were tricked. It was not your fault. You went through a grooming process, which is like abuse training. Like, this person gradually trained you to become like that. Now, here's the thing. You're saying codependency is not a pattern that was with you since childhood. You're saying your family has different dynamics. So if you weren't raised by an alcoholic, an addict, a narcissist, psychopath, sociopath, borderline, or other manipulative character, and by the way, I hear more and more from people now saying that one of their parents was bipolar, and this bipolar person, was very abusive. My suspicion is that that parent might actually have been misdiagnosed. That parent might actually be a borderline personality and not bipolar. I don't know. That's just my suspicion. I haven't met those people. I don't diagnose people, right? But listening to the patterns sound very, very similar. So if you were not raised in any of those situations, because if you were raised in a family where those sorts of, dynamics took place, then you definitely, either became the codependent or the manipulator, right? It went one of either direction. If you're saying you didn't come out of one of those families, none of those patterns were there, your family was really healthy, you didn't have that kind of dysfunction, right? Every family has a degree of dysfunction, but when we're talking about these dynamics, we're talking about massive dysfunction, that's like deeply scarring and wounding to the children, who then grow up to be adult children, who then, as adults, we need to learn to take responsibility for ourselves. We need to learn to meet our own emotional needs. We need to learn to stop putting other people before us, that we are our number one priority in life, that we need to honor our thoughts, our needs, our emotions, our perceptions of reality. If that was not you, you didn't grow up with those feelings, that sense of unworthiness or something, then my suggestion would be to look at what happened. And let's say this was your very first adult relationship with one of these people too, right? Because if there had been more relationships like this, then I would say maybe you're not being 100% honest with yourself about childhood, okay? Because that would be a pattern that's repetitive. If this was like a one-off, right? And this does happen sometimes. Like every now and then I talk to someone who says, okay, this was like a one-off. Like, I've never been in a relationship like this. And like all of a sudden I'm meeting a person like this. Possibly right before you met them, you went through some kind of devastating sense of loss. Maybe someone you love died. Maybe you got divorced. Maybe, you had some kind of crisis at work. Your career was destroyed. Something happened, right? Some major sense of loss. That can leave a person very open. I have often heard about widows and widowers who didn't really have these dynamics and then they met the narcissist. But usually if this person works with me over a period of time, we end up pretty quickly, usually within the first month, identifying that in fact they were raised by characters like this. They just didn't want to admit it. They just didn't want to see it, or they felt this enormous amount of weight of guilt of saying that about their parent because that person was their parent, right? So could be any of those things. You and only you would know that, and you have to be really honest with yourself, right? Because the start of self-love is the cure for codependency, as Ross Rosenberg says, though he calls codependency self-love deficit disorder. If you haven't read his book yet, I would start there. It's called The Human Magnet Syndrome. You can hear him talk about it in some of his videos. You could just go to Amazon and get the book. The Human Magnet Syndrome, like why we're attracted to these people who hurt us, right? And when you see how he describes codependency as an inability to set boundaries, and then also an inability to express yourself. These are the two main manifestations that you'll see of codependency in your relationships, right? Inability to set boundaries with other people in relationships. In other words, you let them take advantage of you, right? And then an inability to express yourself, your thoughts, your needs, your feelings, your perceptions of reality, because the person is gaslighting you or putting them down or telling you that you don't have a right to any of that. Those are typically the things that the codependent needs to work on in order to no longer attract and to no longer be the magnet that attracts these manipulative people. Because if you have healthy boundaries, that will repel toxic, manipulative people, right? If you have healthy boundaries and maintain them, because if you renege on your boundaries, then they get away with it, right? They've manipulated you into breaking your boundaries, very covertly. Sometimes they do that, where it seems like it's your idea, and ultimately it is, because your boundaries are your responsibility, 100%, right? You and only you. But setting new and healthy boundaries will help repel those people out of your life, because you're going to be saying no, right? And saying no is a really hard thing for codependence. And that's part of the recovery process, is learning to say no. That's one of the most important things from the very beginning, is like, what do you need to say no to in your life? Who do you need to say no to more often, right? And then the other thing is working on your expression of self, like the authentic expression of who you are, getting to know who you are, feeling confident in expressing that, giving yourself the permission, the validation, and the sense of approval that you need to go ahead and express yourself. Those are major things that you want to work on coming out of this relationship dynamic. And there could be a lot of shame around admitting that. Like the very first time that someone said to me, 2.5 years ago, this woman said to me, I was talking about my boyfriend, and she's like, he's a narcissist. And I was like, what? No. She's like, and you need to look at codependency, and you should go to a CODA meeting. And I was like, what? No, I'm not a codependent. I had this enormous amount of shame, like deep down, I knew she was right. I just didn't want to admit it. I just wanted to like pride myself in being an independent person, and I don't need anybody, and I can take care of myself. And the reality was that every time I would get into a relationship, I would be with one of these manipulative characters, whether narcissist, sociopath, psychopath, borderline personality. And then it was like, say my codependency was here, I would get into that relationship, and then the codependency would get like significantly worse as time would go on in that relationship, because that person is beating down your self-respect, your self-esteem, your self-confidence. You're contributing to that by enabling it, right? By staying. Like, that's the responsibility you got to take for yourself. So recognize there could be a lot of shame around admitting that you are codependent. Like, I fully admit that. I had a lot of shame around that. I didn't even want to utter those words, and part of that was because I didn't want to surrender to the destiny of that word. I was like, okay, I get it. Those are my patterns. I do have codependent patterns, but I am not a codependent. I do not want to stay in those patterns. I am not going to be that person the rest of my life. I'm going to heal myself. I'm going to heal those issues of codependency that I have, so that I no longer play that role in relationships, so that I no longer attract these manipulative people. So sometimes it's a matter of being honest with yourself, about the childhood situation, about your own patterns, but for real, like, look at it. I would also look at John Bradshaw, the way he defines codependency as spiritual bankruptcy. He's got some great strategies for healing the inner child wounds around that. But maybe, just maybe, that wasn't you. Maybe, you had a major sense of loss and this person came into your life, or something else happened. Maybe it could be like, maybe like your house burned down or something, you lost everything, that kind of thing. And then like you were just vulnerable and open, right? Because when things are crashing down, we're going through major transformational periods in our life. Certain things are being destroyed so that we can rebirth things, we can regrow things, but it's like the old has to be destroyed before the new can be created. If you are in that period of your life, it could be dangerous, to attract some new person when you're going through this. Like there is a sense of loss. You're grieving part of yourself that you're leaving behind. You're grieving old patterns, old situations, maybe old relationships, and maybe they weren't really toxic with manipulators, but you're still in this grieving process, in this like rebirthing process, and you're very open and vulnerable, and maybe you just have the luck of running into that person right at that moment, and they hook you in, and then you get into this, and then you're like, oh my God, I've become this, and that's not me, and blah, blah, blah. So, what you can do is just recognize where you went wrong in that relationship. I mean, it was not your fault, but what I mean is where you went wrong was like where you started enabling these really unhealthy dynamics, where you started making excuses and rationalizations for the abuse that person was bringing into your life, for the way they were emotionally manipulating you. And recognizing that maybe you were really naive. Maybe you didn't see it. Maybe it wasn't that it was familiar and comfortable to you since childhood, but it was just like, you didn't want to believe that there was that kind of evil in the world. Like you didn't want to believe that. You had these spiritual beliefs that was like, everything is good and it's all for a reason, and whatever's happening is meant to be. And then you attract this person, you're like, oh my God, like there really is evil in the world. Like, I have seen evil, right? And now your whole reality paradigm has been shaken up and you've been awakened, essentially. And that is ultimately the gift of one of these relationships, is you have been awakened. The universe, God, creator, whatever you want to call it, has poked you. And it's like, wake up. Wake up. And you can either answer that calling or not. You could go back to sleep, you could try, and what's going to happen is you're going to keep getting into those same dynamics and relationships. Or you can make changes in your life. You could stop the repetition compulsion and you can make changes, because even if that relationship was the first time that happened and it didn't happen before that, I could almost guarantee that if you don't do the work, you're going to keep seeing that repetition happen. You're going to keep attracting people like that. Different flavors, right? But the same manipulative energy that's happening. Like, it's like inevitable. Why? It's a gift for you to heal something inside. It's like a waking up of you to recognize that there's something more to your life than you realize. Something more. What is it? What is it for you? How can you extract something like a treasure and a gift from that experience, that you learned something new about yourself, or you had some like birthing of a sense of life purpose for the first time in your life because of that. Like, I guarantee there is some kind of gift there, and that's what I would focus on extracting, as you're moving forward in life, so that you can use the trauma and transmute that into purpose. And the bigger you grow this sense of purpose, the more it will magnetize you forward toward that and out of the gravity of the past. You also want to do the work, check out Ross Rosenberg's book, check out John Bradshaw, his work on healing the inner child. Like, quite possibly what you'll find is that even though you didn't have a manipulative parent, something happened in childhood. There was a familiar feeling in childhood that you had, that you recognized in that relationship. And maybe it appeared totally different in childhood, but the feeling was the same. And again, John Bradshaw's work, Homecoming, for example, that book on healing the inner child, fantastic for getting to the bottom of those things. And he's got questionnaires in there that will really help you see, like, really wake you up to realize if you have had these codependencies all your life, codependency tendencies all your life, and just didn't recognize or realize it, when you answer these questions, you'll see really clearly, you know, so that we just don't realize like, oh, that weird thing that I do, or like that pattern that I have to like, you know, always put other people first, or to doubt myself and believe someone else, whatever it is, right? As you go through these questions, that can be really eye-opening, because you might be like, oh my God, I just never saw it. Like, I've been codependent all my life and just never saw it, right? So check into that, because one way or another, you still want to do the inner work to get yourself out of that pattern. You know, you've learned that pattern, whether you just learned it now or you've been learning it for decades. Now that that pattern is ingrained in your nervous system, you need to unlearn that. You need to change your actions, new behaviors, new perceptions, new belief systems, so that you don't keep repeating the same old, right? So I'm sending you a big hug.